So what we have seen in last lecture, the epithelium, singular is epithelium and plural is epithelia. So cells are joining each other to form the cohesive sheets of the epithelia. The traditional classification and nomenclature of the epithelium is based on two criteria. These criteria, the traditional and primary classification and nomenclature of the epithelium is based on two criteria. These criteria are the 2D dimension of cells, 2D dimension of the cell, and number of layers of the cells. The primary criteria and traditional criteria of classification of epithelia is based on, again, the epithelium. The epithelium. The classification and nomenclature. Traditional classification and nomenclature of the epithelia is based on the type of cell. So how we decide the type of the cell? The type of the cell this criteria is based on the 2D dimension of the cell. 2D dimension of the cell, and this 2D measurement of the cell is having two components. One is the height and other is the breadth. One is the height and other is breadth. So primarily there are three basic types of cells in the epithelium. When the cells are very wide in comparison to the height, or cells are scale like, we see the section here. This is the section of the epithelium. This is extracellular matrix, or simply we can say the cells are resting on the membrane. This membrane is non-cellular membrane and known as basement membrane. So when we see the cells from top, cells are polygonal in shape. Cells are polygonal in shape. So shape of the cell is polygonal when viewed from the top. But from this side, what we see here, from this side, these cells are flat. These cells are flat, and these are the nuclei of the cells. So when the 2D dimension, that is the height and breadth of the cell, height is very less in comparison to breadth of the cell. When height is very less in comparison to breadth of the cell, this type of the cell, which is wide and this breadth is more. So this dimension is more in comparison to this dimension. So I will draw cells here. Cells are like scales of a fish. So these flat cells, where breadth is more and height, breadth is more and height is very less in comparison to breadth. This type of cells are known as squamous cells. Squamous cells. Squamous cells. So this is the very basic criteria of classification and nomenclature of the epithelia. So this type of cells, which are having breadth more than the height of the cell, these cells are known as flat cells or squamous cells. And these cells look like the scales of a fish. So these are squamous cells. The other criteria, I have told already that there are two criteria. One is the type of the cell and other is the layers of the cells, that is the strata. The second criteria is the layer or strata. So when the cells are flat and resting on the basement membrane, this membrane where cells are resting is known as basement membrane and made up of extracellular connective tissue or extracellular matrix. When there is only single layer of flat cells or squamous cells, this type of epithelia is known as simple squamous epithelium. So what is simple squamous epithelium? Simple squamous epithelium. So when the cells are arranged in a single layer, all cells are resting on basement membrane and there is a single layer of cells. This type of the epithelia is known as simple squamous epithelium. Simple because there is only one layer. Squamous because the cells are flat. So this single layer of flat cell is known as the squamous simple epithelium. And basically this type of epithelium is seen where the cells or epithelia is involved in exchange of fluids, molecules or gases. This type of epithelium is also forming covering of the gastrointestinal tract, covering of the heart and covering of the lungs, where it is known as the mesothelium, where it is forming the peritoneum, the pericardium and the pleura. When this type, the term mesothelium is used for this type of epithelium when this simple squamous is covering the inner surface of the vessels. When this type of epithelium is covering the lumen of the vessels, this is known as endothelium. So term endothelium is also used. And when this type of epithelium is covering the innermost layer of the heart, that is the lumen of chamber of the heart, it is known as endocardium. So there are different functions of same epithelium. Endocardium. This type of epithelium is also covering the alveoli of the lungs, where this type of epithelium is on potential hazard of the toxic gases, where it is facing the potential toxicity of the toxic gases. And this type of epithelium is involved in exchange of gases, because this type of cells are involved in exchange of gases, like the intake of the oxygen and expulsion of the carbon dioxide, because the gap between the two cells is very narrow. It is almost less than 20 nanometer. And two cells are held together by some tight and gap junctions. So there is almost no paracellular exchange of materials between the two cells. So this is the simple squamous epithelium. The other type of cells, the primary cells, I am talking about the very basic criteria of nomenclature and classification of the epithelium. The other type of cell, when these 2D measurements are almost equal, the height and breadth both are same. When the height and breadth of the cell is almost same, the height and breadth are almost same, this type of epithelium I will draw here. So what we see here, again cells are irregular, polygonal, but here the height and breadth of the cell is almost equal. Or square cells. These are the nuclei and resting on the extracellular matrix. So these cells which are having the height and breadth almost equal, this length and this are almost equal. These cube-like cells or cubical cells are known as cuboid cells. these are known as cuboid cells. Cuboid cells are those cells which are having the height and breadth in two-dimensional dimension. The height and breadth of the cell is almost equal. So these cells look like a cube, so named as the cuboidal cells. These cuboidal cells are mainly seen in the ducts of the glands. These are mainly seen in ducts of the glands, and these cells are arranged in, when these cells are arranged in a single layer, these are known as simple cuboidal epithelium. The term simple cuboidal epithelium, simple cuboidal epithelium, and mainly this type of cells are, or this type of epithelia is seen in the ducts of the glands. The third primary type of cell, where height is 2 to 5 times more. When the height is 2 to 5 times more than the breadth of the cell and forming the columns. This type of epithelium, where the height of the cells are 2 to 5 times more than the breadth. This is the height and this is the breadth or width of the cell. When it is 2 to 5 times more than the width, this type of cell in epithelium is known as columnar, because these are column-like. Columnar epithelium. And when these cells are arranged in single layer or single strata, these are known as simple columnar epithelium. Simple columnar epithelium. This type of epithelium is seen mainly in the GIT, gastrointestinal tract. So these are three primary simple epithelia: the simple squamous epithelium, the simple cuboidal epithelium, and the simple columnar epithelium. When these cells are arranged in a single layer and are not forming a strata. But what happens when there are more than one layer of the cells? These will form the layer or strata, and in that case these cells are known as the complex type or stratum type of the epithelium. So I will talk about this type of epithelia in the next lecture.